أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم والعن عدوهم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, my dear brothers and sisters. I hope everyone is doing well on this fine day, first day of Shahr Ramadan. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept your psalm, to accept your a'mal, to accept your salat, and to make us from those who truly benefit from the spiritual upliftment of Shahr Ramadan bihaqqi Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So last day, my brothers and sisters, we discussed moon sighting once again, and instead of going into the ahadith that tell us the method by which we pinpoint the beginning of the month, we came in and we looked at the different opinions of the maraja about when the first day of Shahr Ramadan and subsequently Eid is supposed to be. And we said that the difference of opinion does not arise from the method itself, as in seeing the moon with the naked eye. That's very straightforward. We said the difference arises when it comes to the different places of the world and how they connect to each other in terms of what you can see in the sky, essentially what you can, the moon itself, seeing the moon itself. And we said that famously the ulama were on the idea that the countries or the cities have to be close together for both cities to sort of have the same patch of sky. In other words, for one city's ru'ya, one city's sight, to mean that somebody else in the other city will also be able to see the moon, and they can have iftar or start fasting depending on that one other city's sight or what they saw in the sky, although the other city may not have actually seen the moon. But when Sayyid al-Khu'i came along, we said he brought the idea of wahdatul ufuq, which is one horizon throughout the night and not multiple different horizons in circles, as we said, as we called them. He brought this idea and more or less made it famous, and it became the newly accepted idea amongst the majority of the maraja of today, where Sayyid al-Khu'i said, if two countries share a portion of the night, even a small portion of the night, where one night in one country is at the end and the other night is in the beginning, as long as they overlap in some part of the night, then one's ru'ya, one city's sight, means and equals the other city's sight as well. If the other city doesn't see the moon because of clouds or something else, they can go by what the other city or the other country in this case saw. Jameel. And then we discussed some of the other opinions on this, and we discussed some of the conditions. Perfect. Tonight, my brothers and sisters, we want to discuss also a topic linking to the jurisprudential aspect of Shahr Ramadan, but not about moon sighting. We got that out of the way. If there's any questions, please do send me a message, etc. I'll answer any questions, as we go after the lecture or anything. For anybody that does have an inquiry, I have no problem. My Facebook is there and other social media outlets are there. I'm more than happy to answer your questions, my brothers and sisters. Today, my brothers and sisters, we're going to be discussing some of the general rules pertaining to Shahr Ramadan. When it comes to Shahr Ramadan, my brothers and sisters, almost a week before, the questions start pouring in, and my phone doesn't stop, and the sheikhs here in the house's phones don't stop. The question starts pouring in. Generally speaking, we give a buffer of about a week. But the night before Shahr Ramadan is when your phone explodes. When is the moon, has the moon been sighted? When is the beginning of Shahr Ramadan? When is Eid? Can I do this? Can I say this? Can I do this? And all the questions start pouring in. And subhanAllah, right before, the night before Shahr Ramadan, everyone has questions. So, how about this? Let's answer the questions now, so my phone doesn't explode, and I can have a good sound sleep, inshallah ta'ala. And I think I'll be doing a favor for many of the scholars in and around your areas, bi'awnillah ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Jameel. In the beginning, let's start by saying this. The maraja, my brothers and sisters, they gave a fatwa. And this fatwa, this ruling was taught to us in the Hawza. I'd say maybe the first time we took fiqh. First time we took jurisprudence. And that is, it is obligatory, mandatory on the mukallaf, on the individual, to learn their ahkam, or to learn the ahkam, learn the rules that they are going to be applying in their daily life. If not now, then later on. They must learn those rules that they will be applying. So for example, every single day you are praying. Therefore, you need to know the rules pertaining to prayer. You need to know the rules pertaining to what comes before prayer, the prerequisites of prayer, such as tahara, such as wudu. And you not only have to know the rules pertaining to those, but you have to learn the rules that branch off of these things as well. So for example, you have to know when to do sujood, yes, but you have to also know the conditions of sujood, prostration. We have to learn how to do the ruku'ah, bowing. But not only how to do ruku'ah, but the conditions pertaining to ruku'ah, that you shouldn't be moving, that you have to do it in a way where if you bend down, the tip of your fingers can touch your knees, for example, right? How to do ruku'ah and the conditions for ruku'ah itself. Similarly, a person should know the rules that branch off of the branches. What do I mean branch off of the branches? Rules that you may not necessarily apply every single day, but there's an off chance that you will have to, and a real logical possibility that you will have to apply these rulings. Like for what? Like for example, what? Like doubts in prayer. If you were, for example, standing up doing tasbihat, and you doubted, is this considered to be my third or fourth rak'ah? You must know what to do in such a situation. So you not only have to know the obligation, you have to know the branches of the obligation, so the rulings that branch off of that obligation. And one should also learn the rulings that branch off of the branches, in a sense. Those rulings that would be applied in a one-off situation. When it comes to siyam, my brothers and sisters, and fasting, the same idea applies. And by the way, this idea of learning the rulings does not only come from the hadiths, it's also logical that you have an obligation on your shoulders that you must do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put you on this earth for an obligation, and it is your duty in every single circumstance to know that you fulfilled your obligation. Whether there's a long period of time to do that obligation, like salat, from one time to another time, or it's in a one specific situation. In both cases, you have to know your rulings, and you have to know how you get that obligation off your shoulders. When it comes to siyam, my brothers and sisters, the very same rule applies. But why is it that one day before Shahr Ramadan comes, people are asking questions? It's because Shahr Ramadan comes once a year. It's not like praying that comes every single day, 5 times a day actually. People tend to know more of the ahkam and the rulings for prayer, but when it comes to Shahr Ramadan, they feel, okay, well, you know what, Shahr Ramadan is in 4 or 5 months. I don't necessarily have to learn these rulings until 4 or 5 months down the line. But as human beings, we procrastinate. And so the night before, we're asking questions. So let's answer the questions now, my brothers and sisters. And don't take this lecture, please. Don't take this discussion. I'm no one to lecture you. Don't take this discussion as just a one-off. Okay, I'm good. I applied my rulings. I don't necessarily have to. I don't have to worry about this issue or that issue. Ahmad answered it, and then we're good. And then next year we're gonna forget the same ahkam and ask about them again. No, I ask you to do this, my brothers and sisters. I know we're fasting. We're tired. You probably don't even want to listen to me. But take out a piece of paper, take out a pen, and take some notes. Even if it's one note throughout this entire discussion, if you take one thing from it, that's enough. But take that note and read it over, maybe multiple times during the month. Just look over those notes. I will tell you, if you look over the notes of this lecture and other lectures like it, you won't have these questions anymore, because they just become second nature. And they become known to you through application. Jameel. Let's begin with Allah sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. When it comes to any chapter in jurisprudence, let's say we're talking about salat, the the scholars begin by listing the conditions for this obligation. The conditions that make this obligation an obligation on your shoulders. In other words, if we were talking about salat, for example, salat al-dhuhr, when does salat al-dhuhr become wajib on you to do? Well, there are some conditions. Number one, you have to be baligh. You have to have hit a certain age, a certain point in your life where you are mature. For the woman, it is 9 years in the lunar years, not solar years, which is about 8.5, 8 or so years in the normal years that we use. And for the man, there are conditions, if met, then it would be before the age of 15 lunar years. Jameel. This is what we call taklif. There is another condition, for example, that the time for that specific salat comes in. So there are conditions for something to become wajib upon an individual. Jameel. When it comes to siyam, many of the same conditions that me and you know apply very much the same way. So for example, bulugh, a person must be baligh. Not just baligh, a person also must be aqil. A person must be sane. And mukhtar, they must have the ability to choose and they should not be forced to do the obligation. These three conditions together, my brothers and sisters, we call them al-bulugh, wal-aql, wal-ikhtiyar. We call these shara'it al-wujub. Shara'it al-taklif. Not shara'it al-wujub, shara'it al-taklif. The conditions of taklif. The conditions for obligation, for an obligation to be put on your shoulders and for you to be burdened with that obligation. Shara'it al-taklif. These three, al-bulugh, al-aql, al-ikhtiyar, you will find them in all obligations. In salat, hajj, all of them will have pretty much these three. Jameel. Aside from these three, when it comes to Sawm, there are some that are specific to Sawm. And then there are some that also apply in other places. One that applies to Sawm and other places is what we call adamul darar. That no harm comes to you from fasting. And on this issue, there's a lot of questions. Wallah Ahmad, I work in such and such a field, and when I go, I get tired, I get headaches, and when I come home, I can't see my kids and I can't play with them, and therefore I don't need to fast. And then there's someone that comes and says, you know, Ahmad, I have this disease that doesn't allow me to do such and such a thing if I fast, and I have to take this medication, 1, 2, 3, and 4, therefore I can't fast. Ahmad, you know, I have low iron and I have to take these iron pills 3 times a day, and if I don't, I'm gonna get, I'm gonna get tired, etc. I'm gonna get a headache. You know, there's some people that have it much worse than that, but in this case, this person is saying that they're gonna be tired and get a headache. Therefore, I can't fast. When it comes to harm, my brothers and sisters, we say it's not every type of harm or whenever a person is afflicted with harm, and in this case, that's when they're not allowed to fast, or they should not be fasting. In other words, it's not any type of harm that if a person goes through, they are not allowed to fast and should not be fasting. No, it is a specific level of harm. Rather, it's a specific type of harm. So in terms of a degree, it should reach some sort of threshold. It should get to some sort of degree. And it also should be, or it could be categorized under a type of harm. Number one, let's talk about the degree. What's the degree of harm that allows a person not to fast in Shahr Ramadan? Well, the degree of harm, my brothers and sisters, is this. That if a person sees you from the community, from the people, sees you going through the harm or going through the hardship that you're going through, they consider it to be too much to bear. They consider this harm to be too much to bear, and they consider it to be intense harm. Intense harm. So for example, in Shahr Ramadan, is it normal to get a headache? Yes. But is it normal to have a seizure? No. That is intense harm. That's not normal for a human being to bear. We say, لا ضرر ولا ضرار في الإسلام. This is a qaida. This is a rule. There is no harm. There is no harm in religion. Whenever an obligation is to harm you to a point that it reaches to a point where it's not normal to bear, and it's considered to be too much to bear, and it's considered to be intense harm, then that obligation, my brothers and sisters, either is dropped or is changed. It's changed to a little bit, or changed a little bit, sorry, to suit your situation. Like, for example, someone who can't stand because they're going to harm themselves, well, they sit down. The obligation molds to fit your situation. Sometimes the obligation itself is postponed or even dropped. In Shahr Ramadan, if fasting causes an individual intense harm or harm that is not normal to bear, in some cases, the first case is that the fast is postponed to another time during the year where the person is able to do the fast. In other cases, if the disease or the situation keeps going, then in some situations the fast is dropped and a person pays a certain money instead. So the degree of harm is understood. What about the type of harm? What are we talking about? What do we mean by type? Well, we're talking about how that harm manifests itself. And there are three methods or three ways. Number one, that the disease or the situation that you're afflicted with, the disease itself, gets worse. The disease itself gets worse. You go to a doctor, tell him, what's going to happen if I fast? He doesn't tell you you're going to go through pain. He doesn't tell you it's going to take longer to cure. No, the situation itself, the disease itself intensifies. Number one, the disease intensifies. That's the first type, or the first manifestation of the harm that we're discussing. Number one. Number two, that the disease takes substantially longer to cure. For example, if somebody has some sort of disease, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to give any examples, but some sort of disease, that if they don't fast, the disease will take, let's say, 3 weeks to fully leave the body, and the person is not going to be afflicted anymore. If they do fast, this disease is going to stay in the person's body for 6 months. You got 3 weeks versus 6 months. And this disease is intense. This disease is not a normal disease like a cold or anything like that. No. It's an actual real disease. If you take your medication, if you don't fast, put aside the medication for now. If you don't fast, it will take you 3 months or 3 weeks. If you fast, it will take you 6 months, prolonging the time to get rid of the disease. That's number two. And number three, going through pain that is intense, too intense to bear. So the pain itself goes up. The disease may not intensify. The disease itself, I'm not a doctor, but let's just say the disease may not intensify. The disease won't take longer to cure. But the disease is associated with so much pain that if you don't take your painkillers, that if you fast, if you deprive yourself of water, for example, the pain is unbearable. Pain is unbearable. And at that point in time, a person is not just, he does not fast or she does not fast, not allowed to fast. It's haram for them to fast. It will be haram for such a person to fast. Keep this in mind, my brothers and sisters. And al-darar, harm, my brothers and sisters, is not specific just to yourself. It's also for those that are connected to you. It's also connected to you, the people that are connected to you, so your household as well. What do I mean? I'll give you an example. Let's say if you fasted, you won't be able to go to work. You are physically unable to go to work. Is that enough of a harm? No, because if you're able to sustain yourself for the month, and you leaving work for that amount of time, you take a vacation, take a break, whatever it may be, you can sustain yourself, you're not going to be harmed. So it would be wajib for you to fast in that case. But let's just say, the type of work that you do is paycheck to paycheck, and you will not be able to sustain yourself, and you have debts, and you have rent to pay, and it's your last chance on your rent. Person's situation is horrible. If they stop working, they'll be thrown out of their house. And they themselves, they can bear it, but their family can't bear it. So the harm is not necessarily on themselves, because to them, fine, I can find somewhere else to live. But my old parents, for example, my young children, they're going to live on the streets. That harm is not necessarily associated to you, but it's associated to those that are connected to you. associated to those that are connected to you. In this situation, it would not be, it's not that it's not wajib to fast anymore. It's not that the obligation is gone. There's a new obligation. You know what that new obligation is? Not to fast. Essentially, your new obligation would be not to fast. It would be haram to fast in such a situation. Jameel. This is actually the fifth condition. I skipped some of the conditions. As for the sixth condition that the ulama list, it is what we call al-hadar. And here I want you guys to pay attention. Al-hadar, my brothers and sisters, means to be present. To be present. What do we mean by to be present? To be present in your home city or in a place that you will be staying for 10 days or more. In other words, one of the conditions for fasting is that you are not traveling. Type. When we say not traveling, is it any point in time that you're not traveling? Or is it any point in time that you are traveling? You must break your fast. No, there are details. But before we get into this, I want to say this. When a person travels, their fast is automatically broken. It's not that they had a muftir. It's not that they took something that they are not allowed to eat or drink, for example, or one of the other invalidators of fasting and did them or took them or ate them or whatever. No, it's that one of the conditions to make your fasting wajib is not there anymore. So, a person traveling during Shahr Ramadan is not, and I want to say this, is not intentionally invalidating their fast. Because there's this misconception out there that it is haram for a person to travel during Shahr Ramadan because it's considered to be a muftir, invalidator of the fast. No, this is wrong. Al-hadar, being present, not traveling, is one of the conditions of wujub, one of the conditions for something to be obligatory. It is not an invalidator of the fast. It is not considered to be one of the 8 invalidators of fasting. And for this reason, there are some times where a person will travel during the day of Shahr Ramadan, during the day, but their fast is not broken. And then there's times where a person will travel and their fast is broken. Similarly, the Sharia did not tell you it's haram to travel during Shahr Ramadan. Even if it is to take a break. You're allowed. You're allowed to do such a thing. This is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not running away. It's not a loophole. No. It is allowed for someone to travel during Shahr Ramadan to take a break. Yes, they are allowed to. Mind you, in the first 20 days, it's makruh. It's not that it's not allowed. It's not good to do. The last 10 days, it's allowed, and it's not even makruh to travel just to take a break. This is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jameel, question. When does a person travel? When does a person travel and their fast is broken? Versus when does a person travel and their fast is not broken? Very simple, my brothers and sisters. The cutoff is Salatul Dhuhr. The focal point of the 2 questions is Salatul Dhuhr. Let me tell you what I mean. If a person travels out of their city or is in a state of travel, when Salatul Dhuhr hits, when it's 1:30, for example, Salatul Dhuhr is at 1:30. When 1:30 hits on the dot, if they are A, traveling right now, or they are outside of their city, staying in another city, X amount of kilometers away, for less than 10 days, if they are in a state of travel, once Salatul Dhuhr hits, then they are not allowed to fast the rest of the day, or their fast is automatically broken. For example, I live in Windsor. Let's say I want to go to Toronto. I have family in Toronto. I want to visit them in Toronto. If I leave before the Dhuhr time, then on the way to Toronto, I'm going to be a traveler. On the way to Toronto, Salatul Dhuhr hits. If Salatul Dhuhr hits, and I'm in that state, i.e. the state of travel, my Sawm is automatically broken. My Sawm is what? Automatically broken. By the way, there's a common, I would say, I don't want to say misconception, but a common way this is worded, which is inaccuracy, not correct. It's usually worded that if you travel before Dhuhr, your fast is broken. That's not correct. No. Because why? Let's say I was traveling to Toronto. I left, whatever, 6 a.m. Okay? Let's say I left at 6 a.m. I went outside of my city. I crossed that line. I crossed the line, the X amount of kilometers where I become a traveler. I crossed that line. But something happened and I turned back. And I went back to Windsor. And at Dhuhr time, I was in Windsor. And during that time period when I was traveling, I didn't actually break my fast. I didn't eat or drink or do anything. And I'm in Windsor at the time of Salatul Dhuhr. Then I must continue my fast. So it's not that if you travel before Dhuhr time, no. If you travel before Dhuhr time and you end up coming back to your home city, no, you have to keep on fasting. If Dhuhr time hits and you're in the city. Obviously, this is all for Sadi Sistani. Jimmy. If you travel after Dhuhr time, i.e., when you are in your home city, Salatul Dhuhr hits. It's Salatul Dhuhr. If you travel after, whether you pray Salatul Dhuhr or not, the time of Salatul Dhuhr hits and you're in your home city. You travel after Salatul Dhuhr, you have to continue the fast. It's not that you have the choice to break your fast. No. You have to continue your fast. Yes, if you were staying in Toronto for 3 days, 4 days, less than 10 days, the rest of those days you don't fast. But on your way, because you left after Dhuhr time, you must fast. Does that make sense, my brothers and sisters? Well, you can't really answer me. So, by the way, I say that because when I'm in class, when I'm in my class, what I'm teaching, I always say, does that make sense? And I'm waiting for a reply. Obviously, I'm looking at myself right now, so there's no reply. No problem. Hopefully it makes sense, okay? So traveling during Shahr Ramadan is not an invalidator. It doesn't invalidate your fast in every situation, depending on when you are leaving. Depending on when you are leaving your home. Like, with the next few minutes that I have, I want to answer a misconception that is there as well, or a question that's commonly asked. The question is, back at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the Imams, people, when they traveled, it was strenuous. It was painful. It was hardship for people to travel. And so as a mercy, this is what some people say, as a mercy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, if you are fasting and trying to travel, you can break your fast. Because it was hard to travel at that time. And so the idea that anytime you travel, you can break your fast doesn't apply to today's day and age. Why? Because I can hop in my car, 30 minutes outside of the city, I can break my fast because I passed that point. I passed the X amount of kilometers that I have to pass. The answer to that, my brothers and sisters, is who said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came forward and told us when you travel during Shahr Ramadan, you must break your fast because it's tiring. In other words, under what premise are we saying that the reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you can break your fast when traveling is because you'll get tired? Who said that? And who said at the time of the people, my brothers and sisters, back then, 1,400 years ago, who said that every type of travel was painful and brought about hardship? Let me ask you something. When you hop in your car and you drive outside the city and you pass that point, how long does it take you? Maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour if you live in a big city, maybe 45 minutes, an hour, maybe an hour and a half, right? So you get in your car, you drive an hour and a half, break your fast, and you break your fast. After that 1 hour and a half, you can break your fast. You say, well, yeah, I'm in my car, you know, it's not like before where they had to walk, etc. Tell you, no problem. At the time of the Imams alayhimus salam, the people at that time, they had horses. They had livestock. For me to just give you some perspective, the average speed of a horse is 44 kilometers an hour. Meaning, in 1 hour you can go 44 kilometers. In 1 hour, you're able to go 44 kilometers. Jamil. The distance that you must pass, outside of the borders of the city that you live in, according to Sayyid Sistani, he says it's the border of the city usually. The distance that you must pass is 22 kilometers. Meaning, if you were back at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not 44, sorry, that's 48. The average speed of a horse is 48 kilometers. No problem. If you were at the time of the Prophet and you had a horse, and you left the borders of the city, and you were on a horse, for example, you have to pass 22 kilometers and your horse goes 48 kilometers. Quick math. How long does it take you to go to get to that point where you can break your fast? About half an hour. Half an hour. Meaning at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the time of the Imams alayhimus salam, they had the ability to cross ground just the same way that we had. For us to say, you traveling outside the city is cheating, because at the time of the Prophet they had to walk this distance, or at the time of the Prophet that distance was a huge distance, and you're just misusing the rulings. No. At the time of the Prophet, a person could have got on their horse, half an hour, they could have started eating and drinking. Brothers and sisters, the point that I'm trying to make is that the religion is not what me and you think. It's not istihsan. It's not according to mine and your opinions. It's the riwayat. It's the hadith. It's the Quran first and foremost. It's the wisdom of God. The wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that dictates. This is an invalidator. Well, this is a condition. This will break your fast. Well, this will not. It's very simple. Very simple. Very, very simple. You are not allowed to eat and drink, but you're allowed to take an IV of vitamins. Yes, you are. Why? Allah Ta'ala said you are allowed to do this and you're not allowed to do this. Simple. Simple, my brothers and sisters. Simple. Me doubting and saying, no, this doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense to you. It doesn't make sense to me. But it doesn't make sense to me because I'm ignorant and I don't know. And I don't know the reality of the ruling. I don't know the hikmah, the wisdom of the ruling. And this is perfectly manifested and showed to us, in the story of Nabi Musa alayhi salam and Al-Khidr. Nabi Musa and Al-Khidr. Where Al-Khidr was doing things. He killed a child. He made a hole in a boat. He built a wall for people that pretty much just rejected them. This normal human being looks at Khidr and says, what are you doing? You killed a child. You killed a kid. You took a person's car and you gave him a flat tire. You cut the brakes from a person's car. You cut the brake lines. What are you doing? For me and you, it makes no sense. But when Al-Khidr sits us down and says, look, listen, Ahmad, I did this because of 1, 2, 3, and 4. I killed that child because that child was going to make his parents kafir. And now we gave those parents a child that is not only a mu'minah, but the riwayah says from the lineage of that child, many prophets came. See that boat? It belongs to poor fishermen. And if the king of that village or that city sees that boat and there's no problem in it, he's going to take the only livelihood of these people. So we made a hole in the boat. So the king doesn't take it, they'll repair the boat. See that wall? Well, underneath it there's treasure for children who are orphans. If the treasure shows itself if the treasure is uncovered after the wall falls, the children are not going to have the treasure that their father buried for them. And someone else is going to take it because they're weak. Oh, now I understand. This is very much the same way, my brothers and sisters. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم أسأله تعالى أن يعفو عنا ويغفر لنا ويرحمنا إنه نعم المولى ونعم النصير وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين.